Don't yell it.
What's
Don't
going
yell
on
it.
there, my friend?
Combustible.
Mira que ya viene la revolución, para que se asustan será pa' mejor. Es el pueblo entero el que ya está gritando, ¡viva la revolución!
Iranian nuclear weapons development.
They have turned the island into a communist hellhole.
The experiment in Venezuela has failed completely.
This is a compilation of Russophobia in Hollywood, right? This is the portrayal of Russians as the bad guy in every movie. And we want to, and we can talk, just to wrap up here, talk about the portrayal of Russians and how Hollywood and movies and mind control, the psychological operation, as we we're talking about, plays a role in influencing this Russophobia. So I'm just going to play this.
They're toe-to-toe. The Russian towers above the American. It's a true case of David and Goliath here. It's unbelievable, the condition of both men, but the Russian champion.
Do not try to retreat. You cannot escape. We will not attack if you do not run. We do not want to hurt you.
Somehow I don't believe him.
I order you to come forward, and you will be given a fair trial. Drop your weapons and remain where you are.
You got any ideas?
See, I hate you fucking Russians. You're all crazy and you're arrogant. Now, the Irish, we came here for a piece of the American dream. You people come over here to steal it. So fuck all of you.
Be allowed to go free. Well now, my friend. Well now.
Oh, check it out. All right. It looked pretty cool though, man.
I would say they were way off course. This is very unusual.
You do something, Mr. Teasdale.
Don't yell it.
What's
Don't
going
yell
on
it.
there, my friend?
Combustible.
Возьми бензин.
Хорошо.
Девочка, что ты делаешь здесь? Красивая. Девочка.
Beat you, bitch fool. Вас не вяло.
Девочка, куда ты идешь? Ты такая красавица. Подожди, девочка, куда ты идешь? Что случилось с тобой?
So a lot of crazy stuff, a lot of propaganda. Rocky, Red Dawn. Just to kind of wrap up here, Caleb, because I know you have to head out. Just your final thoughts on Russophobia and how we break the spell of racism and discrimination against Russians, and what the role of the real left is in this whole conflict going on.
Well, most of those clips you showed were from the 1980s. And you have to remember the context of the 1980s, which was that, Jimmy Carter had been, very much, he was the first synthetic left president I think we've ever had, was Jimmy Carter. And that he had been, kind of using a soft power strategy against the Soviet Union. He had set the Afghan trap and forced the Soviet Union to send their troops to Afghanistan. He was covertly funding communists to turn communists against each other. And at the same time, on behalf of big oil, he was making the United States poorer. Sounds a little bit familiar now, doesn't it? But anyway, the military industrial complex and a lot of the small business owners didn't like that. So they kind of revolted against him. And, the period of 1979 and the Iran hostage crisis, 1980, 1981, there was a huge amount of political drama between, leftist groups fighting each other. The Greensboro massacre, where the Ku Klux Klan murdered some communists. And there was a whole lot of, FBI versus FBI, CIA versus FBI, CIA versus CIA stuff going on behind the scenes. And ultimately, Reagan became president. And Reagan was for the military-industrial complex. And because of that, you had a lot of Hollywood propaganda movies that came out playing up the idea that we need to spend money on our military. And that's what that Red Dawn especially, that was basically to justify the support for the Contras in Nicaragua. It was to say that, look, Reagan was saying, look, the Contras of Nicaragua are aligned with the Soviets and they're going to take over Mexico. And then soon the Soviets are going to invade the United States. That was purely a fantasy, but it was a way to convince Americans we needed to spend more money on weapons and such. That's Red Dawn. And the same for Rocky. And that Rambo movie, that's in particular, Rambo played a particular role because after the Vietnam War was over, kind of one of the original QAnons, I think, was this idea that there were a whole bunch of Vietnamese, a whole bunch of U.S. soldiers in Vietnam that had never been returned, that were still being held prisoner. And it was made up. It was a fiction. And that the government was covering it up. They were in some kind of conspiracy with Vietnam to cover up that all these American GIs were still in Vietnam being held prisoner. So the Rambo movie was basically a movie alluding to that, right? That's what it's about, is that, that Rambo goes to rescue his buddies who are still in Vietnam. That's what the movie's about. And that's where that whole idea that the anti-war movement of the 60s was all about spitting on soldiers. It comes from Rambo. There's a rant in one of his movies where he's all just like, oh, who are these maggots? They're spitting on me. I fought for my country. And now every Vietnam veteran ever, has this story about how some anti-war protesters spit on them. And the reality is the anti-war movement didn't spit on soldiers. It tried to recruit them. It tried to recruit them and win them over. And that organizing GIs was a big part of the anti-war movement. You can read about the great work of Andy Stapp. You can read about the great work of the Revolutionary Communist Party when they formed Vietnam Veterans Against the War, which, oddly enough, John Kerry, was Secretary of State. He was a member of very briefly.
Yeah.
He was hanging out with Bob Avakian and all that for like a year, and then he moved on and became a liberal, which I think is hilarious. But it's a way of rewriting the history. But that was also the military-industrial complex fighting back against big oil. And if you want to know what Biden is up to, study the Carter administration, because that's what we're living under right now. This is big oil, Rockefeller liberalism. That's what Biden is doing. And he's trying to demolish the economy of the United States, collapse the United States into a global free trade system. You heard Vosh say that. The global economy is the best way of beating back these countries, right? That's what Biden is all about. Meanwhile, instead of, attacking countries, it's using proxy forces like these Ukrainian nationalists. It's, creating situations where you can frame Russia or China or Venezuela or Nicaragua as the aggressor somehow. This is what's going on. This is the Council on Foreign Relations, late Cold War, manipulative Malthusian strategy.